I'm Otis Shelton, AIChE President, and I really want to thank the South Texas section for inviting me to speak to you tonight. You know, I'm a native Texan, and it's always a pleasure to come back home to Texas. Before I give my presentation, I'd like to show you a short film. And the film focuses on the heritage of chemical engineers and also the value that chemical engineers bring to society. I think you may recognize the leading actor in this film. So without much ado, here's the film, The Promise. Here we are.
On an August afternoon in 1859, a former railroad conductor hired by the Pennsylvania Rock Oil Company drilled a hole 69.5 feet into the earth, and a whole new world sprang forth. A world made possible by chemical engineers with names like Brown, Walker, Olson, and many others. Like those who would follow, they saw the promise in the future. We live in a world that would be virtually unrecognizable without the contributions made by chemical engineers. Yet, for all the advances that have been made, challenges remain. Have we looked far enough ahead? Have we planned accordingly? In moving forward, there will always be unseen risks, dangerous processes, unwanted byproducts. What we leave behind are not just the advances we've made, but how responsibly we've made them. It was with this in mind that in 1908, a group of chemical engineers who saw the promise in the future joined together with a mission to advance the profession and the society we serve. Under the stewardship of AIChE, our profession is stronger, safer, better educated, and more diverse. As we enter a new era of chemical engineering and face new challenges, our charge is perhaps greater now than at any time since our founding. For our mission is not only to protect our legacy, but to keep the promise.
Do you recognize the leading actor? You know, we chemical engineers do have a rich heritage. The question I guess I want to ask you is, what will be the legacy that we leave behind for the future chemical engineers? And that really depends on you and me. And I just want to mention that AIChE, your professional organization, stands ready, willing, and able to help you establish your legacy in the future. So with that, I'll go ahead and start my presentation. Again, I'm very pleased to be here, very impressed by the young professionals you have in your leadership. This is quite unusual for local sections. So you're, as always, South Texas appear to be leading the pack. Here's a little bit of what I'd like to be discussing tonight. One second. Let's try this. One second. Well, let's try a second. This one here? This one? Okay. This evening, I'd like to give you feedback on where we stand with our strategic plan update, and also talk to you a little bit about what we're doing in the international area, in AIChE. And then I'd like to talk a little bit about local sections, the challenges ahead. You may find here in South Texas section that your section is booming and growing, But this is not the case in the rest of the Institute. Since, I think, 2007, we've seen quite a decline in local sections nationwide. So it's an issue a big issue that we need to deal with. And so let's go into the presentation here. First, I'd like to talk to our strategic plan. Our current strategic plan was developed in 2008, and it has 5 goals. And those goals are to become a global organization of chemical engineers, practitioners, to strengthen and create new industry and technology groups, to develop innovative products using virtual technology, leveraging virtual technologies, engaging others in improving undergraduate curriculum and promoting lifetime learnings, and also impacting society by educating the public and government on complex technical issues. We also have some supporting goals, looking at business models that make us less relying on membership dues, making AIChE more inclusive, and also improving the operational effectiveness of AIChE. We are required to review and update our strategic plan every 3 to 5 years. And so last year, our president, Phil Westmoreland, formed a strategic planning team. I was a member of the team to review it and see if it needs to be updated. And he asked past president and member of STS, Chair Dave Rosenthal, to lead the effort. Dave, where are you? He's here. Well, let me give you a little update on where we stand. We've re-examined forces. Sorry about that. Re-examined forces shaping external environment. You know how the world is changing, what impact that's having on our profession, what impact it's having on AIChE. We've gathered broad input from volunteer leaders, such as the board, operating councils, members, to get their unique perspectives of what they think is happening the next 3 to 5 years. To assess the alignment of our current strategy with near and longer term environment, Dave challenged us to identify questions, which when answered would let us know whether or not the strategic plan needs to be updated or not. And some of these questions, example of questions would be like, how's the marketplace for chemical engineers changing? Another one would be fracking, new technology. What impact will that have on job prospects for chemical engineers in the next 5 years? And so the teams, we had 10 such questions that we identified. And so the teams took those questions, reached out to the stakeholders for those questions, got feedback, and sort of identified the trends in that feedback, and then compared that with the current strategic plan to see if there are gaps. And where there are gaps, identify the need for perhaps updating the strategic plan. It's a process that was used in developing the current strategic plan. And Dave expects to have the plan submitted to the board, updated plan submitted to the board in the June board meeting, and plan to roll this out at the annual meeting for the entire organization. So I want to just, Dave really pushed this hard. We had conference calls at least twice a month, right, Dave? And a really excellent job of leadership by Dave, and just want to kind of give him some recognition for a great job here. Dave? Okay, next I'd like to talk to you about our international, before I talk about international membership, let me mention that 2013, we saw the second consecutive year of increasing membership in the Institute. Now that may not seem like a big deal, right? But back in the early 2000s, Dave and I were both on the board of directors. And I can tell you at that time, the membership trend was down, a steep decline. And we worked very hard, racked our brains to figure out how in the world we can change that. And it is so pleasing to see the overall membership trend now reversed 2 consecutive years. Our overall membership, which is at 45,000, the trend has been reversed. It's now positive. And I just want to thank all of you for all your help in making that possible, because that's a major change. It shows that we're adding value to our members that they really want. Overall, our membership is growing, but also internationally, we're seeing membership growth. If you look at the chart here, you'll see that our professional membership is up by 8% from 2012 and 14% from 2010. And also, if you look at the international students, just one second, maybe use this. This part here, you see that there's like a 5-fold increase in international students from 2007 to 2013. And this is important because international students relate to international professional members. Last year, the board of directors approved a motion to eliminate the student fee for international students to be consistent with our practice in the U.S. In the U.S., we don't charge for students, and so we did this also for international students. And so we're expecting, because of this, to see about 4,000 more students, international students, the next 2 years joining the Institute. So we're seeing strong growth in the international area in membership. Let's go here next. But internationally, growth is not the only, and membership is not the only story. If you look at the training courses that we give at companies, we're seeing growth there. If you look at the public training courses planned for 2014, we're seeing growth there. And we're talking about Germany, Australia, Brazil, India. We're seeing also growth in the conferences that we sponsor around the world. This is Australia, India, Brazil, the Middle East. You may ask, well, why is this important? Well, this is important because these courses and conferences increase the awareness of chemical engineers around the world of the value that AIChE can provide through its products and services. And with this increase in awareness, we're able to form partnerships and collaborations with other entities in other regions of the world. So let's take a look at the next slide to show this. You can see here that we really main focus is on 6 regions of the world: China, Korea, Saudi Arabia, Brazil, Singapore, forgive my typing here, and India. And they're different stages of growth. But you can look across here and see for partnerships. Here, that we're establishing partnerships in Saudi Arabia, Brazil, Singapore, and India, again, from this increased awareness of our products due to the training and workshops. You can also see that we have a whole menu of services that we can provide to our international regions, from web traffic to satellite office, depending on their stage of development. We work very closely with members in other regions to identify their needs and try to address their needs. So I think if you look at the total story, if you look at the fact that our international membership is growing, you look at the fact that our training courses and work conferences that we offer are also increasing. If you look at the partnerships and collaborations that we're establishing in other parts of the world, I think you'll see that we're really kind of well on our path or becoming the global leader of our profession. And that's kind of the vision that we have. Okay, so now we're going to talk about something that's near and dear to my heart, and that's local sections. And I just want to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that local sections are facing today, and then approach that we're taking at AIChE to address those challenges. And so, in my opinion, local sections are really critical to our success for our profession. In the U.S., and around the world. And why? But first of all, local sections represents one of our largest member entities. 1 out of 5 members of AIChE belong to local sections. And they're largest internal customer. I think they're our largest customer, and as such, their needs need to be addressed. But secondly, we have very successful national meetings. Okay, good programming, national meetings. We have a total membership of 45,000 members. We have 8,000 members that attend our national meetings, our annual meeting. We have 4,000 attend the spring meeting. That's a sizable number of chemical engineers who do not attend the annual meeting or the spring meeting, who have needs that need to be addressed by local sections. The next one is local sections. We have key stakeholders in our local communities that are best served by local sections. And who are some of these key stakeholders? Well, the key stakeholders are like industry clusters, like here in Houston. You have the oil and gas industry clusters. You have the same thing in Louisiana. In Tennessee, you have nuclear. So we have these industry clusters that are around the world, in the U.S. and around the world, and they represent hidden markets that we need to tap into with our products and services and add value. Another one is a key stakeholder in our local communities are the school systems. We need to reach out like K through 12 and help our local sections. And lastly, we have issues like chemophobia that we all know about. Chemophobia is not something that we can really address through federal legislation. You know, the fear of chemicals, it's addressed by us as chemical engineers talking to our friends, our peers, our neighbors, you know, talking about the risk equation. There's no such thing as zero risk, you know, and then talking about the great job that we chemical engineers do to minimize that risk to our communities. That's not going to be addressed at the federal level. That's going to be addressed in our communities, and the local sections are the great place for helping address issues like that. But those are some of the reasons I think that local sections are really critical to our success. Last year, we conducted a survey on the health of local sections by really doing a benchmark with 6 other professional societies. And the survey was very informative. We identified a number of learnings. These are a few of the learnings. We identified that basically they all have regional structures and regional meetings. They all have some degree of financial support from the mother organization. But we also saw that they have membership trends that were flat or declining. And we're talking about the big ones, ACS, ASME, IEEE. So I asked the question, if local sections are important, then why are we seeing membership trends that are flat or declining? We've done a lot of thinking about this, and we think that some of the key changes that are impacting local sections are changes in our generational differences, changes due to generational differences, changes in industry, and also changes in society. So let's take a few minutes to look at each one of these. These are changes in generational differences. I bet if you look around this room tonight, you'll have this cross-section of generational differences in this room. These are 5 different generations. You know, normally when I attend a local section, other parts of the country, I look around and I see that most of the people attending the local section are 50 years or older. And I think that local sections need to recognize, like associations have recognized, that we have generational differences. And what's worked well in the past for the GI generation, the silent and the boomers, talking about me, may not work so well for the Generation X and the millennials like Carol and others, young professionals. This is something we need to recognize and adapt to. You know, I was a little curious about these generational differences, so I did a little bit more research work, and I identified like there was like 4 pages of these generational differences. But what really struck me was the fact that where we have these differences, and it's our perception of work. It's how we interact with each other. It's what motivates us and how we communicate with each other. We have these basic differences, and these really manifest ourselves in the different generations. And so it's a real challenge. So the challenge we have is, how can local sections address the changes created by generational differences? That's a real challenge we have. It's working well here in the South Texas section. You have young professionals in a leadership position. That's not the case in the rest of AIChE. It's the other side. It's older professionals, and the young professionals are trying to get in, and it's difficult. There's a barrier. And industry changes. I'm going to say something here a lot of you are going to recognize, but when I was a young local section leader, it was I had full support of my senior management. You know, I worked 40 to 50 hours a week. We had secretaries. The company would sponsor, I'm sorry? Yeah, I know, what's the secretary? The company would sponsor these local section dinners, would have 80 to 100 people, no question. You question about participating in a local section meeting, it was encouraged. You wanted to go to a national meeting, it was encouraged. Don't worry about the cost. You know, it seems like management had a longer-term focus on the value, a longer-term idea of the return on investment for participation in local section meetings or for national meetings. You know, things have changed now. Industry, to remain competitive, now have a stronger productivity focus. The work week is now 60, 70, 80 hours a week. That's common. Employee cutbacks, retirements, rationalizations, and those who are fortunate enough to be left behind with jobs are finding that they have even more work because the positions that were eliminated aren't being filled, right? I mean, and not only that, but they have to also leverage new technology to maintain and improve this productivity. Travel costs are looked at very closely with a microscope. And it seems like the management now have more of a shorter-term focus on this return on investment equation for their employees participating in local section meetings and also national meetings. So the challenge we have is what changes in local section offerings add value that industry needs to maintain competitive advantage and support employee growth. You know, we're going to have to get behind the curtain with the industry, work with them, better understand their needs, identify how we can help them be more competitive, and help their employees grow. We've got to do a better job of that. And again, I mentioned earlier about these industry clusters. I think that's a real good opportunity for how we can reach out to local industry, understand what their needs are, identify how we, AIChE local sections, can help. We have in AIChE tremendous resources in terms of technology. You know, industry wants to improve productivity, reach into our technology, our chemical technology and operating council. We have universities. We have the best technology in the world. There's no reason we can't work closely with industry to help this situation. And, but it's a challenge at this point. We also have the impact of social changes. There's a lot more women in the workforce. Technology is moving at a faster pace. We talked earlier about working longer hours. You know, 2 parents are working. The time they spend together is very precious. We see an increasing diversity in our profession. You know, we look around, we see it here. I think there's a number of chemical engineers, the percent of chemical engineers, I think is very high. 40, 50% are women today, which is surprising. Increasing diversity per profession, not just female, but different cultures, increasing diversity of profession. This is Dr. Phil Westmoreland last year talked about how our profession as a whole is diversing into the biochemical, nano, and so we see that as well. Increasing globalization, the need to work with different cultures. The challenge we have for local sections is what local section changes are needed to help address the limited purchase time of members, increasing technology challenges, and the needs for a diverse workforce. How can local sections can be more inclusive to include this diversity in our profession and our diversity in our membership? It sounds like a very simple statement. It's not that simple. It's a real challenge. I want to share with you CEOC, which is the Career and Education Operating Council of AIChE, for which the local sections report into through the national organization. They've been looking at this issue for quite a while. And in 2009, they developed something that was unique to help address some of these challenges. They created this virtual local section to help young professionals connect to peers around the world. And let me just tell you how this has worked since 4 years ago. The virtual local section is now the 5th largest local section. A third of the virtual local section members are now new members. And there's more new members in 2013 versus 2012. What we see here is not a flat or declining membership trend. It's working. And this is an idea of what we talk about and say a virtual local section. What are we talking about here? See where the red dots are. We're talking about 25 countries worldwide. We're linking chemical engineers around the world using virtual technology. These are for chemical engineers who cannot attend a local section meeting because of time or distance. But this is what we're talking about with the virtual local section. Some of the past meeting topics, there should be one soon, which we'll be talking about. We'll have our 2015 presidential candidates addressing the virtual local section. I'll be addressing the virtual local section in a couple of months. But, you know, the topics are basic topics. They're nothing unusual, but they have value for our members around the world, and it's growing. It's addressing a need. It's addressing the challenge. But this is a real success story and shows that you can be successful in addressing those challenges. So what are we doing in next steps for AIChE in this area? Well, last year we created something called the President's Blue Ribbon Task Force on Local Sections. And basically to re-energize local sections. We have a number of local sections having a very difficult time. And first is, we gave the task force a charter to address 6 areas. Again, these 6 areas were to address those challenges we talked about earlier. Let's go back and take a look at the purpose of local sections. You know, the first local section was created back in 1926. Has the purpose changed since we first started local sections? Let's review best practices. The local section committee has developed many best practices over the year. We have a best practice database. Which of those best practices we need to prioritize and migrate to these struggling local sections to address their needs? Let's evaluate learnings from the recent benchmarking study we talked about earlier. And here's one. Establish a defined leadership development process for local sections. You all know if you don't have strong leaders, local sections will wither and die. You know, I've seen it, we see it around the nation. And I want to say a little bit more about this. The Blue Ribbon Task Force is led by your Freeman self. Freeman, are you here? He's here. he's the chair of the Blue Ribbon Task Force. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what's coming, but the Blue Ribbon Task Force identified that this need for leadership development for our volunteers is a need that transcends local sections. It's a need that we need in all of AIChE. And it so happens that Dave Rosenthal, we were in a meeting in New Orleans a couple of days ago and looking at the strategic plan and what the gaps were telling us. And guess what one of the gaps was? The need for a leadership development process. So this is something I think you'll be seeing in AIChE in the future. Again, developing our leaders, making sure we have strong leaders. And it's not only for local sections. We're talking about leaders for the board of directors, leaders for the operating councils. There's a need. It's very hard for us now, difficult for us now to reach out and find the leaders we need. And so we need this process in place to make sure we have a ready supply of trained leaders to take control. The next one here is formalizing local section performance metrics. We have some performance metrics, but we need more of the leading metrics. We need those type of metrics that tells us more quickly when we have problems in local sections. We need those metrics that tell us when we try to solve those problems, if those solutions are working or not more quickly. In other words, we need to more quickly identify this direction this use or not, stop this steady decline of local section activities. Next lastly, is to improve the alignment of local sections with operating councils. Last year we had a meeting with the board of directors and also the operating council's leadership. And the question was, how can local sections help operating councils achieve their goals? Now, the operating councils are the operational arms of AIChE. They're the ones that make everything work. So if you can get the local sections aligned with operating councils, you're really operationalizing local sections. We're involved in a lot more things than would be in them. We found through this workshop there's many opportunities for local sections helping the operating councils achieve their goals. I mean, the goals like K through 12 we have at the national level can easily be done in local sections. And I think you're talking about that here. But these are some of the things that this Blue Ribbon Task Force was tasked to do. They started working back July of last year. Freeman's team has worked very hard. They have developed recommendations. They have developed implementation plans, and they had they shared kind of a report to the board this past week, and basically to assure the board that the recommendations are in alignment with the strategic plan, and they got this assurance from the board that verily, it looks good what you're doing. The next step is to really kind of work out the details with the implementation plans, making sure the resources are in alignment with the staff's ideas. And then we're going to go through something new in AIChE is a new business evaluation process. We're using this now to evaluate new proposals, to make sure we have a process that kind of goes through a stage gate process for identifying risk and helping us make best decisions about investments. So after that process, we plan to take it before the board and get approval. And here's the team. Again, the chair of the Blue Ribbon Task Force on Local Sections, Freeman Self. Vice chair is Brian Daly. And you can look at, you may know some of the names here, but it's really a good cross-section of the best and brightest in our local sections. We have representations from the struggling local sections, from the large local sections, middle-sized local sections, from industry, from academia, a good cross-fertilization of ideas to help us identify solutions to the problems we're facing with local sections. And Freeman's, anything else should I say here in terms of, I think we're really very close to getting some of this approved by the board. In summary, I just want to mention that toward the end of the year, you're going to have an updated strategic plan that's going to be rolled out to the Institute. We're going to need helping us implement this plan. And then as we continue to grow internationally, we're going to need help because there's going to be some issues impacting the South Texas section. I was in Mexico last year, and we signed an agreement with the IMEC, which is the Chemical Engineering Institute in Mexico. And they're very interested in working closely with us, more closely with us. And Texas being closer to Mexico, I'm sure there could be some impact here. But as we grow internationally, the Middle East is another one because of the oil and gas. We have connections there. Issues will arise that may impact the South Texas section. And as we go forward on operationalizing local sections, your help in helping establish new linkages will be needed. But the key point I want to make here is we can do all this planning, and developing back in the home office and the headquarters, but the rubber meets the road is really here. It's here with you. You're the key for making this a success. The South Texas section has always been a leader. You've always been successful, and I'm sure in the future we can count on you to make being a success and helping us do these major things we have planned in the fall. And that's all I have to say tonight in terms of a presentation. I'm open to any questions. Thank you.
Section too many years ago.
Yes, sir.
You were a young man then. We both were.
We're pretty close to the same age.
The question is, how many local section chairs are on the current board of directors?
I'm sorry?
How many local section chairs are on the current board of directors?
Yes, sir. Local section chairs on the current board of directors.
I can't answer that question, but we did ask the question last year when we had the board of directors and operating councils. And I asked the question, how many of you came up through the local sections? Which kind of, not necessarily chairs, but they came through the local sections, means they had some roles. And that was like 95% of the people raised their hands in saying that they came up through local sections. So,
Someone said, I know that guy over there was the chair,
yes,
and I know Freeman was the chair, and I asked that question to Freeman a few years ago, and he said, I think 3 or 4.
I don't know, I'm not sure of chairs. Yeah, I was a local section chair. Yes, sir. You want a mic or not?
Yes, appreciate the focus and everything. What are the plans, though, like for the Leadership Development Conference? I know they stopped at about like 2010 because saving money sort of thing, and they weren't investing. And it was a really cool thing where we had all the leadership going out and touching the young people and the local section people. I remember going to Augusta where we had Dan Lambert there. And, of course, Carol was a shining star, and she gave us talk. And you see the benefit of it. Is AIChE willing to make an investment back into local sections like that?
It's a very good question, and as a local section leader, I really see the value of local section leadership. The problem is when you have this local section leadership workshops, is that people look at the attendance, and for the whole nation of our local sections, we may get maybe 20, 30, or 40 people. And the question is raised is there a better way we can have these local section leaderships? And that's what Freeman's team is looking at. Is there a way, like through regional, you can conduct these leadership development workshops where people don't have to travel to a national meeting, they can travel somewhere locally and get more participation in those leadership workshops. So that's kind of what we're looking at now. The question about the value, it's really valuable. It's essential. But how you do it to get more people to participate, that's the question. And we're working on that. Yes.
Yes. My name is Jim Morris.
Yes, Jim.
I'm an emeritus member on my 80th trip around the sun. And I would just like to get some idea of what the society is doing to develop a set of design practices for process design and also process technology, other than just process safety is an excellent example of what you can do, but I'm thinking about design practices in distillation, heat transfer, all of the unit operations. And many of the operating companies have these practices in their own shop, but I know that ASME does this with their vessel design. They have a lot of code that it's part of their society. And we don't seem to have any of that, except for the process safety and a few other things like that. So I just wondered.
Jim, thanks for, I'm going to answer a question that I'd like for Dave also to answer, because he has a little bit more background on it, but I really appreciate your question, because I agree that somehow we need to leverage our technology more. We have these divisions, forums that have great technology, distillation, heat transfer, fluid mechanics. Why can't we have, that's a good question. I think that's something we should be looking at. We did look at developing, Dave, you can correct this, we did look at developing standards, and I think we decided that's not the way to go, but having guidelines like they have for CCPS.
AIChE is developing a body of knowledge. That's the first step in this process. They've established the content of the body of knowledge. I'm out of the loop in where they're going with it, but they've started at least with that, which is really the first step to determining what you're going to do.
Good. There's a number of papers that have been done, but the thing that we're missing is consolidating those into a set of practices that can be applied to the whole profession, everyone that works in the industry.
He was saying that there are a lot that have been applied to the profession, but not necessarily through AIChE.
No, I think the national meeting. The national meeting does an excellent job of covering topics.
Right.
None of that stuff has been consolidated into a set of what I would consider practices in a distillation or heat transfer.
Right.
Or in the case of the process technologies like the refining,
Right.
subsection ethylene,
Right.
ammonia, all these process technologies we also have, but only things like ammonia and ethylene have any really set of papers that are separate to those subjects. And it just seems to me like we have a lot more technology we could be consolidating on that basis.
Good.
And design practices.
Thank you, okay. I'll capture it, thank you.
But you have to stand in front of the camera.
Oh, no.
Yes, yes.
Oh, the cameraman.
Thanks, Jim, I'll take that back.
Nope, not gonna work. I get your shoulder.
Okay, the question is on membership.
Yes.
Currently, AIChE has an opt-in system for local members.
Yes.
Whereas an opt-out system, I believe, would greatly increase the local memberships. That is where you automatically enroll people and let them choose not to be a member of the local section. I've raised this question to various people casually, but in this forum now, I'm curious, why don't we go for the opt-out system and increase our membership in that manner?
Does the opt-out system assumes that you're paying for their dues, right, for local section dues, and then they would later opt out, or?
Yeah, well, an opt-out system is where you automatically enroll people, but allow them to opt out and choose not to. Allow people to choose not to be a member of the local section before they pay their registration, but go on the assumption that they want to be.
It's basically the little
Okay.
checkbox
Yes,
is
yes.
automatically selected. You have to check it to unselect it. Like, do you want to add this to your desktop?
That's a different approach. We'll look at that. I'll take that back. Thank you. Thank you. I know there's a, Freeman and I, we were talking earlier this evening about, there's a proposal that we would pay for membership, like ACS. Once you have membership in AIChE, you automatically have membership in your local sections.
Oh, that's one step better.
So, so we're looking at that and plan to have this resolved sometime this
Okay,
year.
that is a tremendous step forward.
But,
Thank
but,
you very
but that's,
much.
but that's another point, the opting in and opting out. Thank you.
So in the interest of time, I think we'll take a couple more questions, but Otis, would you mind sticking around afterwards to answer
Okay,
any
sure.
questions? All right, very good.
Hi, I'm Larry Criswell. I've been actively involved in 3 different sections around the U.S. I've been section chairman in 2 of them and treasurer in this local one.
Mm-hmm.
And in the 70s, there was a very active program that got started from a New Jersey section's activities in blacklisting companies that did not respect the professionalism in the chemical engineers. And AIChE's response to that was to actively develop a program to try to improve the professional respect that the chemical engineers would get from their employers. And there was a guideline put out that was very specific about goals that companies should attempt to go toward to provide good careers for chemical engineers. It all of a sudden, it just died in the end of the 70s. Do you happen to know what happened to that?
No, I don't. I'm not familiar with that, but I can really check into it. Dave, you have any? But this is in the 70s?
There was a pamphlet put out that was called the Guideline to, I think, to the professional employment of chemical engineers, and it had guidelines in there about early vesting and a number of other responsibilities. Then I noticed that it changed a little bit. They republished it, and it came out with a whole bunch more emphasis on what the chemical engineer's responsibility was to their employers instead of the other way around. And that sort of killed it.
We still have some people around that were very active back then. I'll check into this, and I can try to respond and send maybe a response back to Carol, okay, on some of these issues.
Excellent.
Now I'm trying to get an answer to the questions I'm getting tonight and get back with you.
My name is Jim Kumana.
Yes.
And this is an idea that I got while you were talking about how AIChE can be more useful to the industry. One of the things that we've seen, obviously, is early retirement and a loss of experience and expertise. Why not have an online expert database and companies get access to that for specific problems and charge for that?
Okay. And again, I'm going to ask Dave if he can respond, because Dave looked at some business models.
AIChE has contracted with a third party, and it is on the AIChE website. For us to manage that kind of process, it's quite an involved process. But what we've done is we've contracted with a third party which hires our experts for other companies and connects the two. It's on the AIChE website. It's an entrepreneur company. I forget, the name escapes me. But you register, and then they try to match your talents with those clients that they have. But there's a third party that is contracted to AIChE that does that. I was told some, but not a lot, but we're still sticking with it. So look on the website and you can find it. We're still part of that group.
Okay, good.
So it does generate some revenue. Okay. Freeman, Norman, do you guys have anything to add to the conversation? Yes. And on that note, I would like to thank Otis for making the special trip out to Houston and letting us know what's been going on with the efforts that headquarters have been making to try and make AIChE a better organization for all chemical engineers. Thank you so much.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And next month?
Next month, the first week of May, we will, I think that's May 1st, we will be at Brady's Landing for the Energy Forum, and we hope to see you there. Thank you very much. for those of you who are still sticking around, we've got Norm who's going to tell us a little bit more about OTC.
Okay. For those that are
Lost there.
interested, pardon? Okay. All right. Well, anyway, for those that are still around, in the very first part of next month, the 5th through the 8th, we'll have the 45th anniversary of the Offshore Technology Conference, and it's going to be the biggest and best event ever. So those of you who have an interest, either